Following a frankly unacceptable performance by the Commanders on Sunday night, head coach Dan Quinn talked about his team post-game and the day after and took accountability for the night's biggest mistake. That and more coming up right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, right here with you 5 days a week. And you can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated. It's commandergameday.com. You can follow me on X at DHarrison82. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view of the day. A special thank you goes out to all of the everydayers, those of you who come through for every single episode. I appreciate you coming through for yet another one. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the critical failures this season by the Washington Commanders. We're going to answer our defensive burning question of the coming out of week 9 about the defense, scheme, talent, or a combination of the two. But we're going to start it all off with Dan Quinn taking accountability for the decision that left Jayden Daniels on the field in the fourth quarter, ultimately suffering that dislocated elbow to his non-throwing arm. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and it's brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers of FanDuel, you bet $5, and if that bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. That offer available to new users, again, of FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So the fallout from week 9 continues to come through, and we've got more confirmation on injuries from players that suffered injuries in week 9. Jayden Daniels' elbow, it is exactly what it looked like, is a left elbow dislocation, non-throwing arm elbow dislocation. There's no fractures according to the x-rays. MRIs were done. We don't have official word on what those MRIs revealed or didn't reveal, but right now, people that I talk to in and around the team are talking like it's good news for Jayden Daniels, as good as it can be, I suppose. Obviously, it's still an injury that's going to cost him some time. Dan Quinn confirmed it's going to cost him a good amount of time, and people are already talking about whether or not Jayden Daniels should even return for the season when the time comes. There was an explanation, or there was a comparison given on NFL Live earlier this week that I thought was interesting. Khalil Mack, apparently the linebacker, suffered a similar type injury, and it cost him 5 games. Now, Khalil Mack is a linebacker, certainly a more physical position typically than Jayden Daniels. However, again, this is a topic of conversation, right? You understand the style of play that Jayden Daniels brings to the field, so that's got to play a role in the decision as well. If it does cost Jayden Daniels 5 weeks, then you're talking about missing the Detroit Lions, the Miami Dolphins. That third week would be the bye week, and then you've got 2 games after the bye week that would also cost him. So really, you're talking about coming back that 5th game 6 weeks from now, and what the state of the season is, I can't tell you right now. I know that we all have some not great feelings about what the state of the season could be by then, but that's ultimately going to be what it boils down to. You know what I mean? If Marcus Mariota can come in and do God's work and save the season and help save the season, if the defense can get it turned around and all these things, then who knows what the state of the team will be by then. So we here at Locked On Commanders, we're going to cross that bridge when the time comes, if the time comes. But again, no fractures detected on the x-ray. That's the biggest part because bone heals and all that stuff, or even more. Ligament damage now is what we're waiting on next. I think Wednesday or Thursday, we might get more information on that. Cornerback Marshawn Lattimore did leave the game with a suspected torn ACL. It is a torn ACL, so his season is over for the Washington Commanders. In all likelihood, his time with the Washington Commanders also probably over. Wide receiver Luke McCaffrey suffered a broken collarbone. So I shouldn't say the expectation, I think the anticipation is that he's probably going to miss the rest of the season. However, that has not necessarily been, I think the phrasing being used right now around him is indefinitely. So collarbone for Luke McCaffrey. I wouldn't expect him back this season. To be quite honest with you, I'm not entirely sure we're going to see Terry McLaurin back this season. And again, that only, spirals into the rest of the anticipation for what the rest of the year is going to bring. Speaking of the Jayden Daniels injury, we talked about, Sunday night after the game, Monday morning after the game, we talked about you can't lead scared. You got to lead all the way or not at all type of thing. Dan Quinn after the game was just talking about going out there and trying to get a good drive on for those guys and doing those things. Did talk about the fact they pulled out the read option plays. So they pulled out the plays that most likely would lead to Jayden Daniels running. On the day after, Monday afternoon, in a Zoom press conference, Dan Quinn did say, quote, man, I missed it. We weren't going to have any read run plays. And honestly, man, that's where I missed it. Of course he can scramble. He's Jayden. It's what he's special at. And that is 100%. That's on me, end quote. And look, I applaud Dan Quinn for standing up there, taking that heat round for the entire organization. And, ultimately it's his decision. He's responsible for everything this team does. So, that's a great thing for the head coach to do. But I do also want to point out, Brian Mitchell, Santana Moss, Logan Paulson, a lot of former players, even Ryan Clark, have kind of come out and said, listen, like, this is the competitive nature of this business. This is what they want to do. This is what they're going to do. This is what you have to do. This is the mentality you need to have. And have kind of, very vocally said, like, they'd have no problem with Jayden having been on the field. And everybody also agrees, like, this is a fluke type accident. This isn't one of those accidents you typically see. Like, you see the broken collarbones, you see the sprain, MCLs, the torn ACLs even, and you don't wish them on anybody. But, going down to the ground like that, players do that all the time. So it's kind of a fluky type of injury to go through. And the thing that I point to, after getting some time to sleep on it and some time to get away from the immediate emotion of it, is that drive starts with 12 and a half minutes left in the fourth quarter. And when Jayden goes out there with 12 and a half minutes left in the fourth quarter, I told you guys in the post-game live episode, there were a couple reporters around me who were kind of like, oh, like they're really putting Jayden in. I think I would probably take him out. But even those reactions, it wasn't like an egregious, how dare you have Jayden out there right now and all this other stuff. And I would venture to say that, if you go back in time and poll everybody at the 12 and a half minute mark, honestly, most people did not have an issue with Jayden going out there for that drive. I think what happens is the optics of it. As he's on the ground, he's on the ground. You look at the scoreboard. There's less than 8 minutes left in the game now, and the score is what the score is. And it turns into there's literally less than half of this quarter left, and your starting quarterback is laying on the ground injured. But at 12 minutes 30 seconds, that feeling isn't necessarily the same. And I think that optic of it is really painting this thing in a different light. Doesn't mean you shouldn't disagree or can't disagree with the decision. I don't necessarily love the fact that he was out there either. I'm always kind of the mindset of, look, understand when the game is in hand, understand when the game is not in hand. And as much as I love Jayden, I think that he has the ability to do miraculous things. Down 3 scores in the fourth quarter, the way that game flow was going, the way your defense wasn't stopping anything, you weren't going to win that game, man. Like, that's outside the realm of anybody's expectations. And I know some fans, even on the other side of it, were like, well, if you tell the Broncos that a couple weeks ago against the Giants, they don't get that win. And I get that as well. But I wasn't watching that Broncos game. I wasn't covering that Broncos game. I can only tell you what I know about the Washington Commanders. And just knowing the Washington Commanders this season, that night, it just wasn't going to happen. So that being said, I don't necessarily disagree with this. What really stood out to me about Dan Quinn's comments were this. They put him out there on the field. They put Jayden out there on the field, but they did it and they removed the read option runs. Why did they remove the read option runs? Well, they removed the read option runs and the quarterback runs because they didn't want Jayden running. And yeah, they overlooked the fact, like, if we call a pass, maybe he's going to scramble. But my thing is this: either go out there to play in full or don't go out there at all, right? Don't go into anything half-stepping. That's kind of my big thing, especially this competitive nature of this type of business. It reminds me of when I was a young, football player with dreams of playing in the NFL, like all of us likely had. My dad told me very young, don't go out there on the field with pads and a helmet on looking to hit people, trying to avoid injury. Because if you go out there playing to avoid injury, you're going to get hurt faster, or you're going to do something that causes somebody else to get hurt faster. So that kind of brings me back to that. And to me, there's kind of like the angel and devil sitting on Dan Quinn's shoulders. And if you're putting him out there already taking a measure to protect him from getting injured, that's something inside of you pulling on the thread, trying to say, Dan, like, protect him. And if you're going to protect him all the way. Don't even put him on the field. Don't protect him halfway. I think that's the biggest lesson for Dan Quinn to learn here. I will say this as we wrap up this conversation. I've been around a lot of coaches doing this job, not just for the Commanders, but for other NFL franchises, met a lot of guys, and none of them have a blatant just disregard for their players overall. But I will tell you that, Dan Quinn's care for his players is up there. It's up there among the most concerning coaches I've ever seen for his players. So for those, and there's not a lot of you, but for those who are going to the lengths of vilifying Dan Quinn, I think it's going too far. It's going too far. It sucks that it happened. Certainly we can look back on it and say maybe it shouldn't have happened. Certainly we can disagree with the decision, but to vilify the man the way that some people are trying to me is just a step too far. So coming up next, we're going to answer the burning question on defense. Is it talent, scheme, or is the totality of everything that's leading to the season's failures? That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Built. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something out of it more than just the place that you're living, right? That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can actually use. When you pay your rent through Built, B-I-L-T, you earn flexible points that can then be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels or airlines, even a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and even more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. What I like about Built is that what I really love about Built is that your rent can finally work for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay for. So you might as well get just a little bit something extra out of it. Whether you're grabbing food at your local spot, your favorite local spot, or you're heading to the gym, you can still earn rewards simply by paying that rent that you have to pay every single month. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use that link so they know that we sent you. Analyzing the defensive breakdowns, not just in week 9, but just in totality. The burning question on the defensive side of the ball coming out of the week 9 loss to the Seattle Seahawks is this defense a talent problem? Is it a scheme problem? Or is it truly both? And typically when we talk about a situation, you got one end of the spectrum, you got another end of the spectrum, and the reality of it is somewhere right in the middle. And honestly, the Jayden Daniels injury is kind of a big example of that. You got people who say, no, he absolutely should have been in there. There's no problem. You got some people who say Dan Quinn is a villain and Dan Quinn should get fired and he's a terrible human being. The reality is probably right there somewhere in the middle, right? So the defense is pretty similar. Now, again, and I don't want to rehash too many bad memories here, but Sam Darnold, 21-24, 330 yards, 4 touchdowns. And to me, this was singularly the worst performance by this Washington Commanders defense that we've seen all season long, partially because you have something positive to build off of from the Kansas City Chiefs game. I understand they end up losing that game 28-7. They get outscored in the second half, 21-0. All that kind of stuff. But that's one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. It's arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. And you're going up against one of the, if not the smartest offensive minds in the NFL in Andy Reid. So of course they're going to come out of halftime. They're going to make adjustments and they're going to do things that Pat Mahomes is going to run around and he's going to have backyard football plays and all that kind of stuff. But you had a lot of positives to build off of from just a defensive perspective coming into Seattle. And it just looked like not only were those positives not expanded on, they were just like discarded. Like the things that they did well in Kansas City, it's like they threw those things in the trash, right? We hear this team talk about all the time, come in, watch the tape, tell the truth Monday, take the lessons, flush the rest. Out of Kansas City, it's almost like they flushed the lessons, took all the bad and brought those with them because performances we saw Monday night in Kansas City, right? Like Terrell Owens, Tyler Owens, the safety, did fairly well. Now, I've always said Tyler Owens needs to be squared up to the line of scrimmage. He needs to be playing downhill, running towards the ball. When he's having to run away from the ball or away from the line of scrimmage or something like that in coverage, that's when he's at his worst. That showed up more in Seattle than it did in Kansas City. Trey Amos, we'll get into that here in just a minute. Trey Amos, arguably his worst night as a pro. And, look, he suffered the hip injury, tried to get out there and give it his best. And you see him not really being able to run and pursue on that 60-yard touchdown. But truthfully, that 60-yard touchdown, the inability to pursue because of that hip injury is just kind of the negative mark on the play. The real mistake is Trey breaking on the play action as hard as he did. And that kind of shows, again, that regression as we're getting into this thing instead of progression. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think the players are getting to, or have gotten to, I shouldn't even say getting to, have gotten to a place where they all are starting to feel like I need to be the spark. Like someone's got to be the spark. There's got to be a play that kind of turns this thing around. I need to go out there and provide it. And it's putting guys in bad positions. But then there's also the scheme, the communication part of it that's leading to some of these confusions. So I think it's just kind of all of it, right? So DQ in his post-game presser on Monday talked about 3 touchdown plays specifically. The 25-yard touchdown, DQ, quote, "We doubled Jackson Smith and Jigba. We got beaten man-to-man by a different player," end quote. 26-yard touchdown, quote, "The third TD was the first play after a fumble. It was man-to-man on a seam route," end quote. 60-yard TD, quote, "The toughest of all was the cover 3. Quarterback got caught up on a run fake. We also missed a tackle on that play," end quote. So that's the run fake. That 60-yarder run fake tucks in Trey Amos. Quan Martin misses the tackle, and the practice squad wide receiver Cody White goes for his first career touchdown. But then the other 2 are in man. So it's you're getting beaten man, you're getting beaten zone. You're not getting pressure without blitzing. If you blitz, you got to go in man, but you're getting beaten man. If you want to put more guys in coverage, you got to play zone, but then you're not getting home with your 4-man rush. So literally nothing is really working in unison. We talk about complementary football. Complementary football between offense and defense, absolutely critical. Complementary football within the unit, just as critical. And on defense, it's pass rush feeding into coverage feeding into pass rush. And it just doesn't work, right? When you play zone coverage, the idea is you're going to be able to cover enough ground to allow your organic pass rush to get home. That's not working. Guys are getting open fast, and they're getting wide open. When you blitz, you got to put man coverage behind it because you don't have as many guys to cover with. So the blitz needs to get home faster because the cover guys are in a harder situation. That's not working. So guys are getting gashed for big yards, or quarterbacks are leaking out for big plays. So really none of it is working in tandem. And that's the hardest thing to fix. At least if you have one thing working, you can build off that one thing. Right now, it's hard to see this defense having any one thing to build off of. Let's get into some PFF grades here. Talk about just talk about how bad this game really was ultimately. So it aligns with some of our analysis. Bobby Wagner, a 30 overall coverage grade. Not great. We know Bobby's not great in coverage. The Seattle Seahawks were able to exploit that as much as some other teams have. Some other teams haven't had as much success, but certainly something that's been a theme all year long. Cornerback Trey Amos, again, we talked about arguably his worst game as a pro. He ended up with a 33.1 coverage grade, so not great at all. The pass rush got 0 sacks, only 4 pressures on the night against Sam Darnold. Deron Payne had a 60 overall rush grade. Javon Kinlaw, 52.9 overall rush grade. Frankie Luvu, 53.1 overall rush grade. All of those below average. So just collectively. Like there's not one person, there's not one dude. But of course, you look at Witt Jr. as the D coordinator, ultimately accountable for what the unit is doing, and Dan Quinn ultimately accountable for what the team is doing. They've got to get this thing fixed. Had this conversation with some insiders after the game in our post-game Zoom, talking about calling for jobs. And I've explained this, and I'll explain this again, and I know some of you aren't going to like it. I'm not really the guy to call for coaches to be fired because I'm not in the building 24/7. I don't see all the meetings. I don't see all the planning. I don't see all the work. Should a guy be fired? Does a guy deserve to be fired? That's for the person who's going to fire him to decide. What I will tell you as an analyst, as someone who watches this team, covers this team, is that something's got to change. That's the simple part of it. Something's got to change. And when you are accountable, when you are responsible for a unit, if that unit needs change, you've got to be the catalyst to be changed. Like, you want to look for a player to be the catalyst. You want to find a player to help you do that, an assistant coach to help you do that. But as the coordinator, you are responsible for making sure that unit changes. So I will say this about Witt Jr. If that unit doesn't change, if that unit can't find a way to build something positive, then if he can't be the catalyst for change, then who is that catalyst for change has to change. That's the closest you're going to get me to calling for a guy to be fired, is if the person responsible for making sure that unit gets turned around can't turn around that unit, you got to go find somebody else to turn that unit around, period. When that happens, I can't tell you. Personally, I've never really appreciated in-season firings unless that person is being a literal hindrance, and I don't think Joe Witt is being a hindrance to his defense. So in that aspect, I don't necessarily support in-season firings, because in-season, you're not changing the scheme. Like, you're not going to, fire Witt Jr. and let's say you put, Darryl Tapp, you make him the interim defensive coordinator. He's not going to then come in the next day and have a whole new defensive operation for the team. It's just not realistic. So to me, You kind of have what you have. You look to get the best out of it. And the big thing is figuring out if this person is the solution to the problem moving forward, or if we need to go a different direction. Witt Jr. is going to move to the sideline. I know that's something that we've talked about before on the program, and it's something that a lot of us have wanted to see sooner than week 10 against the Detroit Lions. But Witt Jr. will be on the sideline when the Washington Commanders host the Detroit Lions next weekend. Coming up next, we're going to wrap up our week 9 conversation by identifying who the Commanders have been so far this season. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. The NBA is back. The NFL continues to roll forward. Hockey is in full swing, ice, puck. I don't know the euphemism to use there, the comparison to use there. There's no better place either way. No matter what you're watching, get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game, or if you're watching the whole game, you want to ride the hot hand, you want to predict the fourth quarter comeback, whatever it is, from start to finish, you can find something, whether it's the next score or it's that comeback run, to bet on with FanDuel. Plus, you can even combine bets into a same-game parlay. Everydayers, I love my SGPs. My same-game parlays are what I do every weekend for a shot at a bigger payout. The more bets you stack up, the more those payouts can have an impact. It keeps every game exciting. It keeps you engaged in every single game, even when you're not watching your favorite team, or if your favorite team isn't doing well and you want to get some personal wins out of it as well. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up today, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Coming out of week 9, news did not get any better for the Washington Commanders, as we learned Monday afternoon. Linebacker Frankie Luvu has been suspended 1 game without pay for consistent violations of the hip drop tackle rule that the NFL put in place recently. So Frankie Luvu was fined in weeks 4 and week 8 for hip drop tackles. He had another one the NFL identified in week 9 on Jackson Smith and Jigba. Fortunately, none of those tackles have led to injuries, but the NFL banned them. So basically, a hip drop tackle, you grab a player around the hip, you drop all your body weight as a defender, and you swing your body into their legs. That is a hip drop tackle, loosely defined. It is valid. It is eligible for a penalty. Frankie hasn't been flagged for any of these, but in post game reviews, the NFL has determined that Frankie Luvu has been guilty of 3 of these now, and so they have decided to suspend him without pay. So he will not be available for the Washington Commanders home game against the Detroit Lions this weekend. Looking at the tendencies through 9 weeks, this team now 3-6, obviously, and there's the old adage of you are what your record says you are. But getting even deeper into the numbers, the rushing attack now has fallen to 4th in the NFL. So again, a month ago, it was the top rushing attack in the NFL. It is just incrementally and almost weekly dropped down in rankings as it continues to struggle. Though Chris Rodriguez did provide a spark in the running game in week 9. We will see if that bleeds into anything in week 10. Red zone offense is still doing pretty well. Second in touchdown percentage, 77.3%. The problem lately is that they just aren't getting into the red zone and moving the ball. Some weaknesses throughout the season, struggling to get pressure. They are now 24th in sack rate. They were actually pretty high in sack rate not that long ago. They have plummeted all the way down near the bottom of the league. The deep ball, of course, is the biggest vulnerability, 16.8 yards per attempt on deep right and deep middle passes so far this season. To be fair, deep left is where they actually do the best against deep passes, and that is the side that Marshawn Lattimore was manning until he was injured. The primary issue for the entirety of the team, ball security. The team is -6 in turnover margin. That's 29th worst in the NFL. They've got 12 turnovers committed and only 6 takeaways this season. So both sides of this ball, the ball are to blame for that, although special teams getting in on the mix with Jalen Lane's fumble on the kickoff return on Sunday night. Final thoughts about this: performance versus culture. DQ was pretty clear after the game, stayed clear about it. The day after, that culture is not the problem. He said, quote, "This is performance related, not culturally related." After the game, he told Chick Hernandez on Monday afternoon, quote, "That's the one thing that I don't worry myself when I put my head on the pillow with this team," end quote. He also said he told the team there's no air support coming, which I think is a really great analogy. It's a military analogy. A lot of military analogies in the game of football air support, you're in trouble, you're pinned down, you feel like you're surrounded or you are surrounded. You're definitely in a sticky situation. Air support comes in, just kind of does their thing, wreaks havoc, and gets you out of a bad spot. It's not coming. Nobody's coming to save the Washington Commanders. The Detroit Lions are not coming in. They're not going to take it easy. The NFL isn't going to tell the refs to call games differently. Depleted roster. The rest of the season right now, we'll see if they can turn it around. But the way that the state of the Commanders are today, it just seems like the rest of the season is about finding out who can be part of success in 2026 and who needs to be moved on from and left behind in 2025. Of course, the trade deadline is also coming up here on Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time is the trade deadline for teams to move players. So we'll see if the Washington Commanders add anybody, if they move anybody or send anybody out. And of course, we'll be back Wednesday to talk about anything and all of it that happens at the trade deadline. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, it's mailbag time. We will talk about any news that comes out, but also I'll be answering insider questions. If you want to get in on those mailbags, have your questions, have your topics addressed here on Locked On Commanders, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Not only do you get to be a part of creating our weekly Wednesday programming, but you're also going to get information from me directly to your phone. It comes through as a text message, not an app. It's not a website. It's a text message you get from me. You put my number in your phone and boom, we're conversing on a very regular basis. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. In the morning is Tyler Rowland. In the afternoon is Tony Wiggins. Get the national view from the entire league every single day, twice a day. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you again for coming through today. To everybody out there, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. And I'll see you again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.